Today, as promised, I'm going to talk a little bit about 5G in response to national strategy to secure 5G.
Most of the studies on cell phone radiation have been done on 2 and 3G technologies. So there really just isn't a lot of research out there on the effects of 5G millimeter wavelengths on health. So that's one issue. The other issue is millimeter wavelengths are very high frequency waves, and that means that they travel over very short distances and they can't penetrate through things like walls and trees.
All right, so you may have connectivity, but you go to another area, you may not have connectivity. You may say, well, 5G is supposed to be the bomb, so why can't I get connectivity everywhere? Well, it depends on the spectrum, depends on who actually owns it, who leased it, who's piggybacking off it. If you didn't know, AT&T, prior to AT&T, was the Southwest Bell. And so with Southwest Bell, they had all copper, but they had all the regions. They had all the areas covered. Well, copper is there. And if copper is in the ground or running in the lines between towers, you come in with fiber optics, yeah, that's going to take a lot of money to change that infrastructure. So a lot of times you would get a phone that was rated at 4G or 3G at the time, but you're not getting connectivity between Monroe, Louisiana, and maybe Huntsville, Alabama. And you're trying to figure out why. Well, because those lines haven't been changed, right? So what they've done is what they call the last mile. You have 4G LTE service when it's available, but that last mile may be 3G because nobody has set up anything in that space that you're walking through, driving through, or flying through. And same thing with 5G. There are different spectrums. So if AT&T purchased license for this amount of spectrum, millimeter, medium, or low, they all are faster than 4G, LTE, but this depends on which spectrum they bought. If they don't have the license for it, they either have to lease it from somebody, share it with somebody, still leasing it, or they own it, one or the other, right? So that's regulated by the FCC. Whole different conversation, but you may or may not have that. So I would not recommend anyone go out, and this is my personal opinion, but it's a valid one, purchasing a 5G phone right now because your connectivity ain't gonna be no faster than 4G LTE. So anyway, as I digress into why people have a problem in their areas with this coming up, spectrums are different. You may not get the connectivity that you want, but at the same time, there's band spectrum that's available in certain areas. And this depends on the speed, it depends on the coverage, and so on and so forth. The FCC controls the spectrum or the bands, or the microwaves, whichever way you want to look at it. This is what's needed to connect all wireless devices and services. And this is laid out in what the FCC calls the 5G FAST Plan, F-A-S-T, 5G FAST Plan. You can look it up on the internet if you want. And if I get an opportunity, I will post up a link to where you can find the FAST Plan, as well as a brief by American Towers on 5G, and really break down what all that means to you as a consumer. And so the other part of the conversation that kicked us off, the cyber security introduction policy, was about what actually are we trying to solve here. So here's something that, some people may have some issues with based on the post I see, based on videos, based on some historical data. As mentioned, many videos, articles, and news reporters are out in various cities and towns covering stories that maybe 5 years ago they were protesting local telecoms like AT&T or T-Mobile, Verizon, Sprint, Nextel, whoever was there, because their internet was too slow, or they keep losing connectivity, or it's buffering too much, and they want more towers, they want more connectivity, they want better access. And some even lobbying for rural areas to get the government to run lines outside the city to everyone that needed or should have the right to high-speed internet service. It should not be just a benefit to having a phone. It should be a right for every citizen to connect to the internet. People were protesting this. People were fighting for this. But guess what? Now the same protesters in the same cities are lobbying without any studies and finding someone that claimed the additional towers that were put out there to give them that service, additional cables running to them, the different antennas that are in their towns now are causing radiation-related damage to families, causing sickness to families and animals. Most of the areas they show on these videos are places where 5G hasn't even been deployed. So be careful when you hear people talk about 5G and these negative effects. Listen to the studies. The studies are not about what's happening going forward. They're about what happened in the past. So you're talking about 4G, 3G, and less, because the area probably don't even have 5G anyway. So I'm not saying that there's not a problem. I'm not saying that electrical grids in relation to where people live and where they fish, where they eat, where they hunt, there may be some type of electrical problem based on the proximity of the electrical grids and the amount of actual power running through those grids that may be causing some physical damage to that particular ecosystem. Absolutely valid. But I would seriously doubt it's 5G that's causing those problems. Now, the level of microwave EMFs that are in cell phones, 4G and below, is the exact same microwave level that's in your microwave that you heat your food up. People can argue that I don't microwave my food for 4, 5, 6 hours at a time. I get it. You shouldn't talk on the phone that long either. But in relation to danger of microwave EMFs, then this is kind of the equation that I have as an example. Well, I'm not here to debate the effects of 5G radiation or just radiation on the body. Not qualified to do that. Nor will I deny that qualified people have shown how the mobile phone level of EMFs or electromagnetic frequencies come rushing into your head when the mobile is put up to your ear and receiving signals from the server. How bad is that for a human being? It's horrible. It's horrible. I mean, you can find it anywhere. Anything negative you can find anywhere on the internet. So not here to argue against that, because it is well documented and there are some truths to it. For me personally, I take precautions. I have what we call the Winolight EMF radiation reducer or eliminator or analyzer. It actually absorbs radiation from the EMFs that are produced by the phone signals. So I have those, I put them on phones, boom, and we try to reduce the amount of radiation that is filtered into our heads. I actually have pendants as well, so you can get a lot of this stuff to help protect you from the amount of radiation that is produced because of the number of connected devices that are increasing day by day. I use an EMF radiation shield on my device, so I understand the science, and I have to do what I have to do to protect my home, right? So I got kids, I got family, and so I use some of these things on my personal devices. But at the end of the day, we want to know what really is the problem that 5G is solving. One, 5G eliminates the delay or buffering, so you have this lower latency. So we hear the term lower latency. That means in relation to when you want to download something and your device is buffering, because your internet service is being disturbed by some other, interaction or some other outside force, then you may be sharing that space with another customer of Cox Cable or AT&T or whoever it may be, because you don't have a dedicated line. Well, what's happening there is the latency, meaning that the delay is taken for those two signals to connect, is because of a lower level of wireless generation or networking. So that lower latency comes with 5G. You don't have as much delay. Like I said at the beginning, you talk about 100 times faster. Yes, when people talk about faster downloads, people talk about, if you go to Verizon website or T-Mobile website or AT&T website, Cox Cable, all of these, right? They all will tell you, here's an example. You can download a movie in 3 to 4 seconds or something like that. So that's the example. Right now, it may take you, 10, 15 minutes to get a very short movie. It may take you 45 minutes to download, 4 to 10 gigs of a 2-hour movie. Well, what if you could take that 2-hour movie and download it in 4 to 6 seconds? No delay. The next thing is slower, what other problem? Slow connections with other devices, enabling multiple device connections. So Internet of Things is really about multiple connections, like smart cities and smart buildings, smart base, smart port. So the smart office, the smart aspect is everything is connected. So when you're driving, you can speak to your car, or when you're not driving. So if you had a Tesla and you have this autonomous driving vehicle and you want the music to change, you just tell it to change. If you want to turn left, then you program it in there, or you tell it to turn left. All of these things. But you have about 700 or 800 connections in your car. So what about a base or a city? So what I found out is better connections, more capacity. IoT facilitates, with the advent of 5G, you can have in a 1 kilometer square, over 1 million devices connected in a 1 kilometer square. So, or, a little bit more than a mile square, 1 million. I can't get my head around that. But what I know, it's a whole lot. That being the case, to have that type of connectivity, you got to have lower latency. You got to have very efficient battery / energy. You got to have more capacity, vehicle to everything, V2X. You got to have better connections, more capacity, faster connections, lower latency, and labeling multiple devices. 5G provides all of that. Heat energy from batteries that are being overworked in a normal system, just like with the Samsung Note some time ago, 2 or 3 years ago, it was catching a fire because it was so hot. Well, now 5G gives you the ability to connect to less energy, be more efficient with more data, voice, and video access. So these are essential things that 5G is solving the problem to. And this comes in so many different forms. We can go on and on about how your house can be connected, how your refrigerator, you have a smart refrigerator, a smart appliance, and your appliance will have a digital screen on it, right? And that screen knows that when the milk gets down to a certain amount, you have to order it. You order from this store, your bank pays for it because you're all connected, and all of the milk shows up at your door via a drone or an autonomous vehicle that delivers in your community. No person has touched it. No person has any knowledge of it. All they know is your machine said milk was low, ordered it, and it arrived at your door. This is the ability, the benefits of a connected system. Now, there's another side to it, and I know everybody's sitting there saying, but don't worry. The president is addressing all of that, and I'll get into that in just a second. I know we're back to the review of the national strategy, so let's not get too far off. But like I said earlier, 5G can be used to facilitate communications for self-driving cars, artificial intelligence, process automation, robotics, IoT, and you have virtual reality, you got augmented reality, you have anticipated intelligence, and you have artificial intelligence. There are so many areas that 5G helps to facilitate better communication or connections with. 5G alone is not the answer. It has to be coupled with one of these other technologies in order for it to really maximize opportunities. Okay, back to the national strategy review. The line of effort number 1 is to facilitate national 5G rollout. What does that mean? That means 5G rollout. We pretty much understand that the president has made it so China cannot basically supply any products to the US. If somebody wants to use a Chinese product, Huawei or ZTE or some of those companies, they may run into some problems. So the national 5G rollout, there has been some talk about during this coronavirus issue, people are shelter in place, and there are companies that have been ordered to go out and install 5G infrastructure, equipment and supplies and things like that, antennas, so on and so forth, into schools in different regions. I read somewhere that the governor of California was basically telling the president to stop instructing these companies to install this stuff. Now, after I did a search, I couldn't find that article anywhere. So it's very interesting how that disappeared. But at the same time, people are using YouTube to show that this COVID-19 pandemic is part of a cover-up for the U.S. to roll out 5G. Now you got South Africa is on board with it. Ghana is on board with it. And so, but the citizens are saying this is a cover-up for 5G rollout, and 5G is more dangerous than the coronavirus. So anyway, there's even been talk that the coronavirus was started because of a 5G issue in China. Anyway, moving on. Line of effort number 2 of this national strategy is assess risks to and identify core security principles of 5G infrastructure. So the president's idea is focused on keeping the nation safe from cyber threats more so than addressing the safety concerns of actual cities and towns in which the 5G capable towers and antennas will be deployed. The concerns of the citizens and their safety are not really mentioned in this particular national review. Yet the president is focusing on a couple of things in this area. He's looking at the risks posed by cyber threats and vulnerabilities. So he wants to make sure the equipment has the maximum level of reduction to any vulnerabilities from outside forces trying to hack in, and developing principles to protect America's 5G infrastructure. Now that's his job, right? So we can't expect him to be going over governors and mayors down to the citizens of these areas and making these decisions. So his guidance is, we're going to roll out 5G. We're going to put it in the schools. We're going to put it in the public areas so that everybody has access, because that's what people have been fighting for. Now that we're pushing that out, then we know that the wars that are fought in the future will be more of a cyber war versus a physical terrestrial war. And so he wants to make sure that that's protected. interesting enough, he references a possible use of security principles that have already addressed much of what is being discussed in his plan. So he goes on to say that he will synchronize part of his plan with what's been presented in May 2019 conference called the Prague 5G Security Conference. In Prague, there's Prague proposals that they came up with to secure 5G globally. Now, what I would like to do is find those proposals and post those up for you, and so you can get an idea of what those are. So if you would give me a second, let me talk about those proposals, because this is kind of interesting, actually. Okay, those proposals are here. So these proposals that are discussed, Prague 5G Security Conference announced series of recommendations, the Prague proposals. So these countries were obviously included in that. You got your Korea, you got your Japan. I don't see China. All right. So in here, the communication networks, a globally digitalized world. So we understand that across the globe, the connections are digital. That's how we have easy access to people on north, south, east, west, right? And so as a nation, as a people, like Americans or British or whatever people in whatever country, I mean, globalization, you know, from a nationalistic perspective, everybody wants to make sure that they can reach out and touch anybody, anywhere, at any time. That happens on the citizen side, that happens from an entrepreneur's perspective, that happens from a government perspective, even if it's legal or illegal activity. Everybody wants to have that quick access to a global network. I too have a global network of friends and business partners and so on and so forth. And so it is so much easier to do that, but there's still challenges with the technology, right? You can use Zoom, you can use Slack, you can use, what's the other one? Microsoft Teams, you can use Skype, you can use WhatsApp. I mean, all of these different platforms, Facebook Live, Facebook Watch, all of these are there. Instagram, you know, TV, YouTube TV. But at the end of the day, we all want to be able to have dependable technology. When we connect, we want to have high speed, low latency technology to allow a true digital evolution around the world. But we want it to help stimulate growth and innovation. And so when we're using 4G, we may not be able to have those autonomous vehicles at the level we want. Tesla has been trying to avoid any accidents, but there's been 2 or 3 that have been fatal when people employed the self-drive mechanism. They put all the features and safety features there, but that software, something is missing. So we think from a technological perspective, maybe it's the 5G. If it can get it rolled out, if they can get it to work properly, connect it with their AI, connect it with their machine learning and the automation, maybe it'll all work out for them. So connectivity is really the essence of what all people around the globe aspire to. And now this digitalized world is right smack dab in front of us. So when people talk about no 5G because they think it's dangerous, tell them no cars, tell them no cigarettes, tell them, you know, no animal meat, tell them don't drink cow's milk. I mean, I can go down the list. Don't drink bottled water. I mean, you can go on and on and on, but 5G is here. So now it's just a matter of risk tolerance. So let me not talk about all of this, but I'm gonna scroll down a little bit and I want to get into some of the things that they talk about here. So ensuring security while supporting innovation. So innovation is the main driver of development and economic growth in modern societies. It also fosters new security solutions, not problems, solutions. The US talks about cyber threats. The Prague or the EU talks about security solutions. So policies, laws, and norms should allow security measures to be flexible to manage the interface between security and specific national conditions. Through this flexibility, creativity, and innovation should be encouraged. So if we use the platform correctly, if we use the technology correctly, then we should make leaps and bounds into the future. Supply chain security. Supply chain security is all about allowing like-minded or partner nations to do business internationally and basically sidelining the not like-minded, non-capitalistic societies to do business with you, because there's this battle between Asia and America, and so we know that Asia's been winning for a long time. The U.S. had what they call the Office of Technology Assessment, and so that office would keep up with emerging technologies and brief the president on what's going on. Well, somewhere down the road, I think in 1992, 1995, somebody decided they didn't need it anymore and disbanded it. And in 2019, after President candidate Andrew Yang was talking about the war on normal people, and in his book he referenced the way that the Fourth Industrial Revolution has basically taken over and will continue to take over jobs and automate a lot of jobs in the US and around the globe. I guess somebody decided to bring back the Office of Technology Assessment, and now that's being put back on the table. But here are some of the proposals that the Prague conference discussed in here. So as Trump has created the national strategy to secure 5G, and his first line of effort is talking about the rollout of 5G and future networks, then look at some of the commonalities where he could have easily just utilized this particular structure and would have been right in line with the other nations to what they want to do to make sure that 5G is secure. So of course, policy is the first area of concern. We got to have some type of policy that drives the rest of the conversation. Here's what I like about it. Every country is free, in accordance with international law, to set its own national security and law enforcement requirements, which should respect privacy and adhere to laws protecting information from improper collection and misuse. It's up to each country. So it's not about Trump saying, I'm going to secure 5G so my international partners can follow me. Nobody needs to be following anybody. Every country is free to set up their own national security and law enforcement requirements so that they don't encroach on people's privacy, but at the same time, they have to fight against cyber crimes and have a high level of cybersecurity as well as data protection. It's very important. B, technology. So technology, obviously, 5G plus other technologies is essential to this. And so one of the things I like here, they talked about, in order to increase the benefits of global communication, states should adopt policies to enable efficient and secure network data flow. Stakeholders should take into consideration technological changes accompanying 5G networks rollout, i.e. use of edge computing and software-defined network and network functions, virtualization, and its impact on overall security of communication channels. So we know that when you want to do more video conferencing, when you have international companies that have to open up bandwidth and for extended periods of time to have those web conferences, let's say you use WebEx and you have this collaboration going with somebody in Germany, a team in Italy, a team in Thailand, and a team in the US. You may have 15, 20 people on that call, and it's all video. So video obviously takes more bandwidth. that connection is open a lot longer, and it's very vulnerable to hackers because of the distance. So you have to have your plan in place that you can secure the communication channels, right? So all this is already discussed at the Prague conference last year. So they talk about economy as well, but they do include the customer in the technology piece, which is good. Economy. So let's see. In the economy piece, something I wanted to talk about in the economy piece. A diverse and vibrant communication equipment market and supply chain are essential for security and economic resilience. Once again, they're talking about how do we win the technology race because we're so far behind, right? So the U.S. is about 25 years behind China. So we're trying to figure out how do we get ourselves in a better position. And so right here, it talks about robust investment in research and development benefits the global economy and technological advancement, and is a way to potentially increase diversity of technological solutions with positive effects on security of communication networks. So they definitely want to put more money into it. So that's where the partner states, when they work together, they can invest more. And that's where the U.S. comes in, because the U.S. prints money like it's just falling off trees. Whole different conversation about the future of money. You can look at one of my other videos if you want to hear about that. But what's interesting about that piece of it, even though the U.S. currency is valued as the lowest probably in the world, it's still a common currency that crosses many borders. And so no matter what happens, they have put themselves in a position that they have invested in so many countries that these countries, I guess, feel like they have an obligation to borrow money from the U.S. in order to have this robust investment in research and development, because a lot of them can't afford to do that at the level that is required. State-sponsored incentives, subsidies, or financing of 5G communication networks and service providers should respect principles of fairness, be commercially reasonable, and conduct openly and transparently based on open market competitive principles while taking into account trade obligations, so on and so forth. So definitely do things right and we'll be good to go. So lastly, but most importantly, security, privacy, and resilience. All stakeholders, including industry, should work together to promote security and resilience of national critical infrastructure network, teams, systems, and connected devices. Very interesting, but essential to roll out a vibrant guidance, security protocols, whereas all the nations can talk to each other. Because as we know, with 5G, we have the ability to talk to anybody, anywhere, at any time. And that being the case, we know that there are opportunities that can present themselves. And so another piece of that is the fact that we have so many different networks that are global. The US has so many contacts in so many different areas. And so even though we don't overtly do it, the US is still going to be trying to police through cyber security, police the world. And that cyberspace, right? US wants to dominate cyberspace. So that's why they roll out and put more satellites into orbit and so on and so forth. It's crowded up there. But under this 5G umbrella, is the president authorizing 5G infrastructure to be put into schools and libraries while people are sheltered in place? I don't know. Possible. Probably. Sure. So what does 5G mean to users? As I mentioned earlier, and I just wanted to give you an idea about what I was talking about earlier, there's a whole brief on 5G and how the towers work, how the antennas, what is a MIMO antenna, what is a edge computing, how does the server work with the antenna versus the actual device. All of these things are very important. But this is some of what I was talking about earlier, where you have lower latency, increased speed, higher density, more capacity, less energy. So this is what you can expect if you have a meaningful network that's set up properly, the towers in place, the antenna in place, a safety in place, then you're going to get the results, right? So that's really the essence of what 5G brings to the table. Now, in light of that, we still have to respect the fact that 5G has its challenges, has some drawbacks. There are people that, no matter what you say, what you do, will not believe that it's safe. Well, I'm here to say it's possible. So let's get into number 3, line of effort number 3 in the national strategy to secure 5G by the president. Line of effort number 3 is to address risks to United States economic and national security during development and deployment of 5G infrastructure worldwide. So one of the key ways Trump has done this is by eliminating use of any Chinese equipment, as we all know. So within the Federal Acquisition Supply Chain Security Act of 2018, there are certain criteria for who can buy from national or international entities. There is actually a separate list of approved vendors, one and the other. Normally, in contracts and acquisition, foreign entities are not able to supply electronic equipment. There are certain equipments that foreign entities cannot bid on, nor can they supply. Now, there may be foreign entities that may have made in America equipment. Yes, they can bid on it, but a lot of times you'll have an American company that will purchase equipment internationally because it's cheaper maybe, and they supply that to the government. And down the road, somebody's looking and they find out that, oh, you supplied us with something that you said was legit, but it was not. And so if it wasn't made in America, this category, you cannot supply. And then Defense Department is part of that. Electronic equipment is part of that. Surveillance electronic equipment, put it like that. Now, there are only a couple of companies that are leading in the 5G equipment and infrastructure area that are allowed to supply because they have been vetted by the U.S. government. So a little different twist to it right now. But then Trump, in his policy, goes on, or his strategy, goes on to mention there are high-risk vendors in 5G equipment manufacturing infrastructure. We all know that to be any Chinese company supplying 5G equipment, you will definitely not be on the list of approved vendors. But with the executive order mentioned in the strategy that he's published, he says, Trump says, the U.S. will leverage these activities to address the high-risk vendors. So leverage, and you know how leverage works. Let's say, for instance, when Trump first came aboard and he was evaluating who was actually getting assistance from the U.S. You see what he did with China. Another thing happened in the Philippines, which you may or may not know. They were given, the U.S. was giving the Philippines like $1.2, $1.3 billion in aid every year. But then Trump decided, why are we giving you all this aid? Okay, I'll tell you what. You do this for me, and we'll make sure you continue to get that money. If you don't do this, then we're going to stop it. Well, guess what? The president over there had a whole different plan, and he didn't respect Trump and his little bullying tactics and basically cut him off. And so Trump was trying to use the leverage of assistance to bully them into doing a quid pro quo. Okay, anyway, I digress. Line of effort number 4 for the national strategy to secure 5G. Line of effort number 4 is to promote responsible global development and deployment of 5G. The first line, in that particular line of effort to promote responsible global development and deployment, Trump talks about like-minded partners. Like-minded partners. He likes using that. So this is another lean towards allowing purchase from a foreign entity to further his agenda in this area of leading in 5G. This effort will deal with developing international security principles and promoting U.S. leadership and adoption for international standards developed by the U.S. He does go on to say that he will ensure that the private sector is participating and being informed of the U.S. standards when it comes to 5G infrastructure. Now, he says that, but when you look online or in the news, in some cases, there are people protesting. I think I just read something about in Belgium, they protested to a point where the government stopped the installation of 5G equipment and said we're going to do further testing. So it does happen if there's enough protest. Now, today I discussed there were 4 line of efforts under the national strategy to secure 5G in the U.S. Trump talks about the U.S., but then he goes on to talk about international like-minded partners so that he can roll it out far and wide. We do understand that Trump has come into office and created an environment where don't work with China, China pay us, and kind of let's recoup some damages for allowing you to get away with this for so long. Even though there's a relationship there, we get some things, they get some things. That's how basically governments work. But he's basically damaged that. And in order for Trump to look like the U.S. is leading in 5G, he basically cut off the 5G leader. So he cut off the 5G leader in order to look like U.S. is leading in 5G, to give us a chance to catch up after 25 years of being behind China. Well, while Trump is creating the rift between Asia and America, we are basically going to be further behind because China is creating an avenue towards 6G while we're chasing 5G. So we know that the informed piece of standard and guidance that Trump's cabinet, Trump's team is putting out there is not reaching everybody. It's not connecting with the people. That being the case, you're going to see more people complaining about the effects, negative effects of 5G, instead of being informed by the studies, by the support, by the actual benefits of 5G and the rollout. But no matter what, we are here. The government is rolling out 5G for the promised benefits of 5G. There are many, many scientists out there and telecom experts that have delivered what the benefits are and what the risks are. They've done it in the past, and they're going to continue to do it again. Just like when we as consumers are deciding on things like what type of bottled water do we want. If you're in Flint, Michigan, you don't drink the water. But if you're getting something like Sunny or Aquafina, it's purified drinking water. That means that somebody took tap water and they cooked it to a level, added some minerals in it, and basically put it in a bottle because spring water, different brands, you can go online and find all kinds of tests for water, which one is the tastiest, which one is the most beneficial, which one is the most nutritious, and so on and so forth, because all of them have a risk. You just have to decide what level of risk you're willing to take. You have to decide what type of washing powder you will choose. There's 5th generation, 7th generation, or Clorox brand, Oxy Power. And then there's a generic brand. They all have risks. You put it in your washing machine, you put it on your body. Some people get rashes, some people don't. What level of risk are you willing to take? You do it every day. We know there are inherent risks in the choices we make. We make the choices knowing that it has a safety factor, but we decide what our risk tolerance is in everyday products. How many people are smoking today? But yet and still, there's a notice on the side of the package. So it is true for picking up a mobile phone with 3 or 4G, we know of the risks to brain damage from radiation, EMF, microwaves, and such. We have become attached to our mobile devices, but we know of the risks because the studies are about 4G to 1G. The studies are not about 5G plus because the infrastructure has not been fully put into place. So most of the time when you see references to 5G and what it's doing to the community, it's probably 4G or less. We try and mitigate the risks. Like I said, I have family to take care of. So I use something like this to mitigate the risks. These are EMF absorbers, and they absorb the radiation from the servers and the signals that come through. So when we try to mitigate the risk, then think about this. Put this as food for thought. Just as the Camel cigarettes marketing to young kids on their posters and Philip Morris and all these companies showed us, people will smoke no matter how many warnings are put on the packaging or how many fines are levied against Philip Morris. We know the risk. We know it's more to it than advertising. We know there's a psychological effect that's going on. And marketing cell phones to kids is happening. Marketing cigarettes to kids is happening. Marketing bad water to kids is happening. Milk, juice. There are so many things out there that are unsafe at the levels they are being provided to us. But yet and still, we know the risk. We know the psychology behind it. We still have to determine our risk tolerance. It's not if it's safe. Yes, it's unsafe, but what are you willing to tolerate and how do you mitigate those risks? This is essentially what you have to decide. We all have to decide. The risk is here, yet the benefits of having a mobile phone, the benefits of faster connectivity, the benefits of lower latency, the benefits of higher density and more connected devices are too big to ignore. Or do you want to go backward? So ask yourself this question. Why 5G? You probably have already asked that question. Why 5G? Well, when you ask that question, ask this question as well. Do you want to give up your phone, your internet, video conferencing, video connectivity, video gaming, easy access to your mother, father, son, daughter, extended family, and go back to dial-up, rotary dial, handheld, phone connected to the wall? What about a string and 2 cups? What's your level of tolerance?
A lot of the experts say these concerns are a bit overblown. The real dangers with this non-ionizing kind of radiation is that the heat gets absorbed into your body. And so the further away you are from a radio, the less likely you are to absorb that radiation. So people aren't going to walk around with a 5G base station strapped to their head. So I don't think people have to really be concerned about that. The other thing to keep in mind is that when you have a bunch of radios deployed in a very small area, the power is going to have to be relatively low. So otherwise they would interfere with each other. And the same goes for 5G handsets. They're going to be very low power too. So if they're low power and you're not right next to them, it's very unlikely that you're going to absorb much of that radiation.